Okay, hello and welcome. I'm Jason Gumpert from msdynamicsworld.com, and we're here for a new session in our Spring 2015 BI and Reporting webcast series. Today I'm happy to welcome Bob Bedard, President and CEO of deFacto, as well as Senior Manager Megan Lapointe for a new session on forward-thinking business planning. As we get started, please know that you can use the Q&A block or the chat that you will see to the right side of the webcast session here to ask your questions and provide your thoughts. We will be making time for questions at the end of the event. So, without further delay, Bob, let me hand it off to you.
Thanks, Jason. Can everyone hear me okay?
We can, yeah.
All right, good. So thanks, everyone, for joining us today. I'm just going to walk through a handful of slides here just to give you an overview of who we are and what we do. And then I'm going to turn it over to Megan to walk you through a demonstration of deFacto, just to illustrate some of the ideas that we have built into the product. And then we'll open it up for some questions. If anyone has any questions, either during the presentation or during the demo, you can type it into your little chat window there, and then we'll answer those at the end of the session. So let's see. So real quick, deFacto was formed by a group of experts who have built and implement performance management products from Hyperion and SAP. So each of us have been in the market in this industry for virtually our entire careers. Our customers range from Fortune 1000 companies, names that you've heard of, and a lot of middle market companies whose names you may have not heard of, and many of those customers, by the way, are Dynamics customers. We're a Gold ISV, Microsoft Gold certified partner, and a managed partner. We also sponsored the deFacto 5K at Microsoft conferences, which is a charity event, which raises money for local food banks. Not sure if anybody's participated in one, but it's a lot of fun. Also, we're followed by analysts like Gartner and BPM Partners who recognize us as a leader in our field. Just a quick visual of some of our customers. Like I said, you'll see some whose names you recognize and others you may not have. So let's just start with what we're trying to achieve here. We get the opportunity to talk to a lot of customers day in and day out, and it seems that every company is looking to achieve the same goal, and that is to improve their financial and operational performance. Of course, everyone knows a key driver of performance is the ability to make faster and better decisions made on an increasing volume of data and based on a range of internal and external factors that affect any given business. The problem is it's really hard to assess what impact any given decision has on a company's financial or operational performance, whether it's an operational decision or a strategic decision. It's also difficult to determine what is the best choice for any given decision. Of course, all this leads to the goal of most companies, and that is to give every business manager throughout an organization the ability to analyze the impact of any given decision based on a single centralized point of reference. Many times, business managers will turn to tools that are out there already. For instance, ERP systems and tools such as analysis cubes or reporting tools that utilize the data structure of ERP systems are not really structured for managing the business. They're really structured for process control and managing transactions. They do a great job with that, right? And a lot of business intelligence tools are really designed for historical analysis, so really to help figure out why things happen, but they're not really great for analyzing the future impact of decisions. Traditionally, budgeting, reporting, forecasting, and even CPM tools are tools that have been used to try to get more of a forward-looking type perspective on where their business is going. But for the most part, many of those are sufficient for standard management functions, but they're not really sufficient for doing real-time or strategic analysis and planning. As a result, we're seeing an emergence of offerings that go beyond those traditional tools. These new tools use high-performance architectures that leverage advanced relational multidimensional database technologies and in-memory technologies. They're faster, smarter, high-performing performance management tools that include model-driven real-time decision analysis and planning. So if you take a look at really the evolution of these tools, way back in the 70s and 80s, they started as individual tools. In fact, tools like Forecaster, FRX. And then vendors would integrate some of these products. And in fact, the Hyperion solutions really are an integrated set of individual products. And then the market moved to single unified CPM products, which increased performance and capability. And those types of products are now giving way to higher performing, more intelligent tools that are really focused on real-time corporate planning and modeling. So the tools also integrate the world of business analytics. And the great thing about it is it offers a full range of business perspectives, past, present, and future. They also structure key capabilities and functions of BI performance management predictive analytics into a single platform that supports a seamless process of business modeling, decision analysis, and forward-thinking planning. Gartner actually recognizes this new class of offerings, and they call it corporate modeling and corporate planning and modeling. Gartner and other analysts also recognize deFacto and a leader in this quickly emerging field. So deFacto is a complete corporate planning and management tool that offers business managers across the company the ability to analyze the financial and operational impact of day-to-day business decisions or long-term strategic decisions using a centralized single point of reference, which is essentially the company's operating plan. And it offers all the tools needed to manage the company to that plan. So capabilities include business modeling, what-if analysis, budgeting, forecast reporting, and more. Before we go to the demo, I just want to give you 2 examples of how customers are using deFacto, because I think this really helps you understand, what the value that we bring to the table. So there's a mobility company, brand name, very large global mobility company that uses deFacto really from a very strategic perspective. What they do is they model their business and model all the business drivers of their business, which include basic mobile devices. So they'll have a model for iPhone 6, iPhone 6 Plus, all those devices that drive traffic over their network. And they do that so they can model and forecast things like where to build cell towers, what kind of technologies we invest in, how much bandwidth, even pricing models. They also use it to model any acquisition they're going to make, and then they can do what-if analysis and take a look at what those companies look like when they're merged together. And then, quite frankly, when they do the acquisitions, they'll actually use deFacto as a system of record to QC that the financial systems have all integrated properly. So at the end of the day, what deFacto has allowed them to do is to really perform much more detailed and comprehensive analysis, forward-thinking analysis that was just not that possible before. So that's a very strategic use of the product. A media company uses deFacto in a little more operational day-to-day type application. What they do is they have modeled their business, and they use deFacto to help them make media buy purchases every day. What this company does is they market consumer products via infomercials. So buying media, buying the right media on a day-to-day basis is really the best way that they can kind of drive their overall financial performance. In this case, they refresh their model every 10 minutes, so they're always dealing with a fresh model to make decisions. As a result, they've been able to make decisions about media purchases that are really critical to driving their overall performance on a basically an hourly basis. So with that quick introduction, I'm just going to turn it over to Megan, and she'll walk you through the product and again, highlight some of the capabilities of the product.
Thanks, Bob. I am just letting the screen refresh. Okay, Jason, can you see my screen?
We can't see your screen.
Okay, great. All right, so a couple of things that Bob mentioned is, and as you saw in the presentation, was that deFacto supports this model, analyze, plan, or MAP methodology of forward-thinking planning. So what we're looking at right now, we are in Excel. As Bob also mentioned, it is a Microsoft-centric solution. So we are in Excel. You can see that there is a deFacto ribbon up here. This is showing us all the capabilities that we have in deFacto, including refreshing your data, opening your templates or reports from a shared location, submitting data, processing workflows. Data Manager is a very powerful tool. It helps us load data from Excel if that's where the source is. We can extract data, we can run business logic, and we can clear data. And all of this is based on the security that's been set up within deFacto. And we have some reporting tools. Over here we have our current view, and this is how the data is interacting. So right now we are looking at a dashboard for consolidated worldwide regions, and that's because that's what's on my current view. But I could easily change that to another organization. Maybe I want to look at it for the United States and refresh that data, and now I'm looking at all of my data for the U.S. So thinking about this model, analyze, and plan, one of the most basic aspects of modeling, and there are many different facets of modeling, but one of the most basic aspects has to do with setting up your business structure. So as I mentioned, this current view is made up of our business structure. It has all of our dimensions that we need to report and plan on our business and visualize our business. And this is completely customizable. So whatever you need to build in your structure, we can bring it into deFacto, and that can be an automated process. So when I clicked on model here, it just opened up my entity dimension, and I wanted to just point out that with any dimension that you would bring into deFacto, you can have as many views or roll-ups or hierarchies as you need. So right now I'm looking at a regional roll-up of my organization, but I can also look at that as a functional roll-up. So this is a very simple example, but just extrapolate that out for any dimension. You can have as many roll-ups or hierarchies as needed. This is just one example of how you can report on deFacto data. This is obviously a dashboard view, and we're looking at a lot of different information. So while we see sales and margins up here, we have operating expenses, salary expenses, and then over here we have our workflow status. So this gives us a quick view of who has and hasn't submitted their budgets in this case. I want to show you a couple of different reports just to give you some visibility into how you can report on data. It's very easy to analyze your historical performance so that you can plan your trends, your forward trends. So I'm just going to start with a report, and what you can see here is that this report is an actual versus budget report. If I look at my actual versus budget, this is a value coming in from deFacto. So we have a calculation that's calculating our actual versus budget, and it's also basing that on the type of account. So we're looking at a revenue account here. It's a favorable variance versus an unfavorable variance. If I take a closer look at this, we can also make changes to the view of this data. So right now I'm looking at gross margin, but I could change this, and this is just my account structure. Maybe I want to take a look at, I'll look at operating expenses. And when I refresh this, now I'm looking at my expansion of operating expenses. And this expansion is a really powerful feature in deFacto because it's going to bring in anything that rolls into that account. So in this case, operating expenses is showing me all of those accounts that have data, and then it's going to display that. And if we think about that, if something comes into deFacto, a new account, so let's say your general ledger has a new account added, deFacto can automatically pick that up and bring it in. It can add it to the hierarchy if we have some sort of numbering rules that we can assign. And then the next time somebody runs this report for total operating expenses, that account is automatically going to be added because we're expanding on it. So it's a really powerful reporting feature. I'm just going to go back to gross margin. Some other ways that we can analyze and investigate our data is through an investigation tool. So just a couple of things about what we're looking at. We do embrace all that Excel has to offer. So we are using conditional formatting here. We're also using an Excel chart here. And you'll see as I change the data that we're looking at, this is going to update along with it. So if I wanted to look closer into my external sales number, I can investigate that number. We have a lot of different types of investigations. You can actually add your own type of investigation, but some are built into deFacto. So I'm just going to start with a simple drill. I want to see all of the entities that make up my external sales. I'm going to only look at those entities with data. I want to see all of my levels, and I just want to see the base level members. And I'll sort that in descending order. So now when I look at this, I'm looking at all of my entities that make up that external sales number. I can take that one step further. Maybe for New York, I want to take a look at all of the products that make up my New York sales. So I'm going to go back in and investigate this, and now I'm going to select product. So what's helpful here is that only the dimensions that aren't at the base level already are showing, so you have a visual indicator of what you can drill down on. In this case, I'm also going to rank the results. I want to see the top 5 selling products for New York. And when I click OK, now we see these top 5 selling products. I can see that my truck is the top selling product, my 1.5 ton dual wheel truck. So what we are looking at right now is data that is in deFacto. We can also go outside of deFacto to help with this analyze piece of the puzzle. So again, model, analyze, plan, what we are doing right now is analyzing our data, and that will help us with our forward trends. But if I wanted to take this one step further and say, all right, for this particular product, I want to take a look at all of the sales transactions that make that up. So I'm going to drill into that data. And now what I'm looking at is all of the transactions that make up that sale or that revenue number. So for each transaction, I'm also taking a look at the invoice number, and I can also take a look at the actual invoice itself. So deFacto can integrate with any relational data source, and it can integrate with document management systems. So now I see the invoice for that particular transaction. So just going back to where we started, we had one report. We can look at a lot of different views of that data. And that's one of the goals, is let's create a very dynamic report that we can look at across the board, our data however we want to see it, so that we have less reports and templates in the first place. And because of our expansions that we can use within any report, we have less maintenance. It's also very easy to create a report. So just so you can get a feel for that, we do have a wizard that helps us with that. So I'm going to create a very simple report. I'm going to bring entities into my rows. And then maybe I want to see time going across my columns. Now you can see up here, we have a title that's automatically being populated. This is a dynamic title based on my current view. But I can also put something up here. This is going to be my test report. And now I'm looking at a report for the U.S. actuals, because again, that's what's on my current view for the current year. Now I can make changes to this report from the current view. Maybe I want to take a look at worldwide. Maybe I want to look at that for the budget. And maybe I want to look at that for next year. So as I make these changes, and refresh my report, I'm going to see that update. Now I'm looking at consolidated for budget for next year. Well, maybe I want to see more details in this report, so I actually want to make a change to the definition of the report. I can go into the report editor to do that. And maybe for my entities, I would also like to see another level of detail. So I'm going to go and I'll increase this to 3 levels down. In addition, what we see here is that my total consolidated worldwide is at the top, and I really want that to be at the bottom. So I'm going to display the location for that parent after children, or basically at the bottom after the subtotal. For time, I'd like to see all of my details. So I want to see the monthly data, quarterly, yearly. And when I make these very simple changes, now I see my report expanded for all time periods. I do have a total at the end, so my next year total is displaying. And I'm looking at more details for my rows as well. I see now 3 levels down from the top, and I also see my total at the bottom. So very easy to create reports, and they can be much more complex than what we're looking at now. Maybe for my entities, I want to take a look at accounts for those. I want to look at my gross margin data for all of my entities. Now we see the report rebuilt, and for every entity, I can see my gross margin. So building reports is very simple with the wizard. Again, we're keeping these reports very dynamic so that there's less maintenance. I can view this report for any entity, any set of accounts, any scenario, time period. So if I change this now, I'm going to go to US East and refresh this, and what we're looking at is Boston's budget for next year. If I take a look at my structure here, US East includes New York. We're not seeing that because we have to press if 0 turned on. And what that's telling me is that I have not submitted my budget for New York. So I want to go into some of our planning, budgeting, forecasting concepts as well. And I'll go over here and change my dashboard to New York. And as we take a look at this, we can see that the budget has not been submitted. In addition, over here in my workflow status, I can see that, again, my workflow budget or my budget assignment has not been submitted. So we've taken a look at the analyze piece. We took a brief look at modeling when it comes to how you're going to organize and structure your dimensions in your application. Again, those are completely customizable. You don't have to use any specific terms. You can come up with your own terms. But now let's take a look at some of the planning capabilities that we have in deFacto. First, I'm just going to start with processing workflows. Now, workflows are an integral part of deFacto, but you do not have to use them in order to consolidate, or to collect your data. It's really optional for you. But if you do choose to use it, it gives you another level of control and another level of visibility into where you stand in. It could be data collection process. It could be that you're doing a variance analysis and you want to see who has submitted their variances. You can use it across the board. What I'm looking at is the submission that I have due. And you can see that if I highlight my assignment, I can either open the schedule, I can submit for approval. And then down here, we have all of our submissions that have been approved. So I get an overall view of what I need to submit in order to complete the budget process. I'm going to go into planning. And what we're looking at here is a basic template. It has some color coding. We can see that data is going to be entered in the yellow cells. Notice also that we have comments here. So you can submit comments along with your budget or forecast. You can submit comments for variance analysis. Comments come in very handy. They're secured the same way data is, and it really just helps the process. That way, people who have access to that data can go in and read the comments, whether, again, it's for budgeting or variance analysis. It's all going to be stored in the database. From a budgeting perspective, there are many ways we can budget. Starting with the most basic, and that is just saying, all right, I have my sales and marketing expense. Maybe I just want to put in an Excel formula and say there's going to be a 1 or 5% increase over last year. So I'm just going to put this in. I can copy it over, and I can submit that data. So I'm just going to send data. And what's happening is my data is going to the server, and it's being submitted and processed. In this case, what processing means is everything's going to be aggregated for me. So as I refresh the data, and you can see the process is complete, when I refresh, I'm going to see my operating expenses aggregated along with my operating income and net income. So this is an example of budgeting or forecasting at the account level. But I may have some situations where I want to put in another level of detail. And for that, I can go into line item detail. So what this is showing me is I can put in several line items of detail for my travel and entertainment expense. Maybe I have a budgeting seminar to attend, so I can put in comments any step of the way. And that's going to be in March, and that's going to be about $3,500. I may have a conference to go to. That's going to be in May, and that's going to be about $2,200. So again, you can just put this in and send the data in. Same thing is happening as last time. We are processing the data. And when the whole process completes, and again, we get that visual indicator with the refresh button, that means that when I click on refresh, I'm going to see those values in here. So we can budget on many different levels and forecast. This all does come into play with any type of planning that you may have to do. And you can see here again with our MAP methodology, we are planning for the future. So those are just two very simple ways of entering data into deFacto. I want to show you a couple other examples. So I'm going to go into my sales detail. So I want to get this data updated as well, starting with sales. What I'm looking at here is a template that has all of my products going down, and I want to plan for the units. What will happen in deFacto is that the revenue and cost of goods sold will automatically be calculated for me. So let's say that I'm planning on 15,000 units for my next year budget. I can spread this data, and the basis for the spread is really up to you. What we have that we can select from in this example is last year's actuals, next year budget, a 5-4-4 spread, or a straight line. So I'll just leave this at last year's actuals, and I'll click on spread. And this is spreading my 15,000 units based on last year's actual. And you can see up here we're really doing two things. We're planning, we're modeling. Part of the modeling has to do with how we're spreading our data. It also has to do with how revenue and cost of goods sold will be calculated. So I have this one spread done. Maybe I want to do another one, and this time not across the board, just for a particular product. So I can go across this way or down, and maybe for my hybrid, I'm going to spread, I'll just put in 1600, and I'm going to make this a 544 spread. And what I'm also going to do is lock some of these cells because some of these values are high enough. I don't want them to change. So I'm going to lock those cells. You can see those cells are now in red. And now when I spread this data, you'll see that every line will change, or every value in this row will change except for those red ones. And now we're at a total for this product of 1,600. Well, I can take that back. I can say, well, really, I want to stay at my 15,000 units. So I'm going to undo that spread. I'm back to 15,000. I'm going to clear my locks. I'm going to submit my data. So now what's happening is deFacto is taking all of these units and it's multiplying it by the revenue, or by the price and cost that we also have stored in deFacto. So you can see over here, we're looking at our price and cost for every product for every time period, and that's being multiplied out so that when I refresh, we're looking at our calculated revenue and cost of goods sold. So another aspect that comes with modeling to get our plan together is, and in this case, we're basing our plan on historical data, but our current pricing to bring in our revenue and cost of goods sold for the budget. What's happening in the background is that you can have automatic calculations. So as I submitted these units, deFacto knows that these units are attached to a calculation that has to be executed in order to get my revenue and cost of goods sold calculated. So that happens automatically. You have any type of calculation you can set up to be an automatic calculation or to run on demand. And I'll show you an example of the on demand as well. So now if I go back over to my template that I started with and refresh this, I'm going to see my revenue data in here as well. So I'm building my budget based on a lot of assumptions for my price and cost, putting in my units, putting in my line item detail expenses here. Now we have the big bucket of salaries and salary-related expenses. So for this, I just want to point out that we're going to see another level of detail. So here we have our employees. And this is just one example of how we can do this. Right now, I'm looking at all of my employees, their FTE percent, their hourly rate, increase, and then FTEs. And then that goes out and calculates all of the salary and salary-related expenses. So let me just go and add somebody to this list. I have one new hire for next year. I just found out that I'm going to have another one that was approved. So I'm going to add that to the budget. I'll say that the FTE is 100%. It's going to be for 12.25 an hour. I'm not going to put in a salary increase. And I'll just say that that person is starting in April, and I can just copy these FTEs down. Now when I submit this, again, all of these automatic calculations are happening in order to get my salary and salary-related expenses calculated. It's basing these on these inputs. So from a maintenance standpoint, on a yearly basis, we would just update our rates in order to be ready for that planning cycle. So again, this does include modeling and planning at the same time because we're modeling our calculations and then updating our rates and our FTEs based on all of that information. Then that information, if I just refresh this, is going to be calculated so I can see my salaries and all of my salary-related expenses as well. So again, just keep in mind that deFacto is very flexible. this is just one way of handling, in this case, our salary and salary-related expenses. We have some customers that have an annual rate. We have some customers that have both annual and hourly. So you can structure it and model it however you need to. And again, going back to my original template and refreshing, I see my salary-related data coming in as well. Now, if I go back to the starting point, my dashboard, and I refresh this, I see my budget has been submitted here. You can see that there's still no corporate budget. So just in this example, the thought process is, okay, we are going to be playing in our own sandbox as we put our budget together. When we're ready for it to be reviewed, we can copy that over to the corporate budget. So with that said, I'm going to go into my what if scenario. And what you can see here is that the budget has been submitted, and we're looking at this from a top level right now. It's been submitted. We have a corporate budget that doesn't have anything in it. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that corporate budget. I could choose any bucket that I want to copy this to, but this is going to just take everything. So all of our entity, all of our products, all time periods for my budget, and copy it over to the corporate budget. I see that this has been completed, and I can refresh. So this is really an example right here of running a business rule on demand, because I'm ready for it to be run. I clicked on commit data to deFacto, and this ran the business rule that copied one bucket to another. And the point is, from here, on a corporate level, adjustments could be made to this budget, and then you'd always have the two to compare to. You'll always have the My Budget, you'll always have corporate budget, and you'll always be able to have your variances against those. I can also see all of my details by company. So I see the budget and corporate budget tie out across the entities. And then I also have details by month. And again, you can slice and dice the data however you need to in deFacto. So now by month, I can also see everything tying out or matching. But again, I also see that from a top level here. Now going back to the dashboard and refreshing, I am going to see my corporate budget. At this point, I may be ready to submit my assignment. So this is just an indicator to whoever needs to review my assignment that the data is in there. Now our workflows are notification enabled. So an email can be sent when a cycle is open or closed, when something is approved, submitted, rejected, so any step of the way. So I'm going to take this and say, all right, I'm going to submit it for approval. Now this goes to the person who needs to approve the assignment, which happens to be me, because I've set myself up as both the submitter and the approver. And what we will see when we go back to the dashboard and refresh, that my status over here of the workflow has changed. Now it is submitted but not yet approved. And that just holds the data. It's going to be locked for the person who submitted it, but the person who needs to approve it can go back in and they can reject that submission. So if that happens, that automatically goes back to the person who submitted it. So just from an overall view, we've taken a look at, again, the most basic things for modeling, the way that you have your structure set up in deFacto. You can build that based on different models as well. So we have our finance model, which we've been looking at mostly, But we also have an HR model, which is where we have all of our employee data stored. We have a price and cost model, which is where we have our the price and cost for all of our products stored. We have projects, so if we need to budget based on projects, we can do that as well. But everything can feed into one central location to view. You don't have to worry about switching models. This is really just a great thing for security purposes so that users are only seeing what they're supposed to see. Also with modeling, we saw how business rules and financial intelligence and consolidation all come into play, because as we were building our budget, that data was being aggregated not only on an account basis, but also on an entity basis in this case, where we can see all of our data for all of our entities rolling up automatically. We also took a look at reporting, and the reporting was showing us that we can look at many different views of our report. You can have one report that shows you a lot of different data so that you don't have to build a lot of separate reports. We can just have the current view help us with that. And then for planning, we saw our budgeting and forecasting. We can do forecasting based on any set of drivers or budgeting based on any set of drivers as well. So that is it for the demonstration. We will turn it over to questions, or if there's other things that you'd like us to show you that you didn't see, that you were hoping to see, we can show you more about deFacto. So I will turn it over to Jason.
All right, thanks, Megan. Yeah, great. So at this point, if it's okay with Megan and Bob, we can open it up to questions, and you can use the Q&A block that you should see to the right of the slides now to ask your questions, and we have a few minutes for that now. So the first question that came in, do the dimensions have to match what's in our GL system?
No, they don't, and that's one of the great things about deFacto and its flexibility. Generally, we may start with your general ledger and actually build that structure, but if you have other things that you need to make visible in order to evaluate your business, we can add that as another dimension or another model. So we have a lot of options, and we also have the ability to add whatever you need in order to give you better visibility into your business.
All right. And is there a limit to the number of dimensions that can be added to deFacto?
No, there is no limit. I mean, you do have to consider, obviously, any sort of memory and your, sorry, I'm drawing a blank. It'll come back to me, processors on your servers, but we size nicely so that we can grow into your business as well. So at any step in your process, if you've been live with deFacto for years and now you want to add CapEx, let's say, that's very simple to do. We can add an asset dimension. We can add a CapEx model. We can feed the data from CapEx back over to the finance model, so everything is always in sync. So you really do, again, have the flexibility to grow deFacto with your business, with the changes that you may be making to your business structure.
Okay, let me make a last call for questions here, and then we'll get on to our final question. Can deFacto handle top-down budgeting and forecasting?
It can. So there are a lot of different ways that you can do top-down budgeting and forecasting. One way is we can do it through allocations. So you can take those high-level drivers that have been dictated maybe to you from corporate, and you can allocate those down based on any combination of dimensionality. So I could do it to all of my entities, or I could do it to entities and products, or just products. So it's really, again, up to what your business dictates and we can model that in deFacto.
Okay. Well, we are at the end of our question queue, so we can start wrapping up. Anything else you wanted to add, Megan or Bob?
I don't have anything else.
All right. Well, let me just say thanks again for taking the time to present to us today. We really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone in the audience for your attention and for your questions as well. With that, we will wrap up today's event. It is being recorded. We'll be making it available on demand. So thanks and have a great day.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks, everyone, for your time.